The desolate expanse of Charon Prime stretched endlessly, its ochre skies shrouded in a dim haze. The air shimmered with the oppressive heat of 2 setting suns, casting long, jagged shadows over the jagged terrain. In the midst of the barren wasteland, Captain Glenn Maxwell knelt, wrists bound behind his back, flanked by 2 hulking alien guards. Their armor, blackened and dented, reflected the grim history of countless battles, but Glenn's calm demeanor betrayed no fear. "Human," hissed one of the guards, its voice guttural and laced with disdain. The alien's elongated snout curled into a semblance of a sneer. "Do you understand what awaits you in the Empire's hands?" Glenn lifted his head, his piercing gray eyes locking onto the alien's gaze. There was no trembling, no pleading, only an unsettling stillness. "I understand enough," he replied evenly, his voice steady despite the blood trickling from a fresh cut on his cheek. The guards exchanged glances, momentarily disarmed by his composure. Glenn inwardly cataloged every detail. Their positioning, the faint hum of a transport ship in the distance, and the rhythmic clicking of the surveillance drones hovering above. Every detail mattered. This was his plan, after all. The ambush had been swift, brutal, and exactly as he had anticipated. Alien forces had intercepted Glenn's squad on a reconnaissance mission near the Empire's border, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Glenn had ensured the fight looked genuine enough, delivering orders, firing rounds, even taking a glancing blow to the shoulder. The squad's retreat had been inevitable, and Glenn had surrendered just as planned, knowing the Empire's notorious hunger for human prisoners. As the transport ship landed with a thunderous hiss, Glenn's thoughts drifted to the small, concealed device embedded in his glove. His fingers twitched imperceptibly against the trigger mechanism, activating an encrypted beacon. Somewhere, far beyond the Empire's reach, his signal would be picked up if he lived long enough to see it happen. A ramp descended from the ship, and an alien officer emerged. He was taller than the guards, his crimson armor glinting ominously. His reptilian eyes scanned Glenn with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "This is the human who caused such a commotion?" the officer asked, his tone sharp and clipped. "Yes, Commander Zarish," one of the guards replied. "Claims to be an ordinary soldier, but fought with surprising skill." "Surprising for a human, you mean," Zarish corrected, his lips curling into a grin that revealed jagged teeth. He stepped closer, crouching to meet Glenn's eyes. "Tell me, soldier, what secrets do you carry that make you so willing to be captured?" Glenn returned the gaze without flinching. "Secrets? You give yourselves too much credit. Maybe I'm just tired of running." Zarish chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "A defiant one. Good. That will make breaking you all the more satisfying." The guards hauled Glenn to his feet and marched him onto the ship. The interior was stark and utilitarian, its walls lined with restraints and observation panels. Glenn's keen eyes scanned the space, noting every potential weak point. Zarish followed, barking orders to the crew as the ship prepared for departure. Glenn was strapped into a cold metal chair at the center of the room, his bindings tightening with an audible snap. A drone descended, its lenses whirring as it scanned his vitals. The hum of machinery filled the air, but Glenn's mind was elsewhere. His signal had been sent, and now it was a waiting game. The ship shuddered as it lifted off, the ground below fading into the haze. Glenn remained still, his breathing controlled, his face a mask of indifference. He knew the eyes of his captors were on him, watching for any sign of weakness. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Zarish loomed over him, his shadow casting a menacing silhouette. "You must think yourself clever," he said, circling Glenn like a predator. "Humans always do. But I assure you, your cleverness will not save you." Glenn allowed himself a faint smirk. "Is that what you tell yourselves to sleep at night? That humans are just clever nuisances? Tell me, Commander, if we're so insignificant, why are you so interested in what I know?" Zarish's expression darkened. He slammed a clawed hand onto the chair's armrest, leaning in until their faces were inches apart. "Watch your tongue, human. You are nothing more than a specimen, a curiosity to be dissected. Glenn held the alien's gaze unflinching. Keep telling yourself that. The tension in the room was palpable. Even the guards shifted uncomfortably, unaccustomed to such audacity from a prisoner. Zarish straightened, his features tightening with barely concealed rage. Take him to the holding cell. We'll see how long his bravado lasts. The guards complied, dragging Glenn down a narrow corridor and into a small, dimly lit cell. The door clanged shut behind him, the sound reverberating through the confined space. Glenn sat on the cold floor, his back against the wall. He glanced at the concealed device in his glove, the faintest blue light confirming the signal was still active. His plan was unfolding as expected, but the next phase would be critical. The Empire's arrogance was his greatest weapon, but it was a double-edged sword. One mistake, and he wouldn't live to see his fleet arrive. As the hours passed, the ship's hum became a constant rhythm, lulling most of the crew into a false sense of security. But not Glenn. His mind raced with calculations, his focus unwavering. He thought of Commander Ashton Cole, of the trust they had built over years of service. He thought of Earth, and the millions who relied on men like him to keep the darkness at bay. When the ship's engines slowed and the faint outlines of an enormous Imperial facility came into view, Glenn's jaw tightened. This was it, the heart of the beast, the place where he would uncover the secrets humanity needed, and, if all went according to plan, the place that would burn by his hand. Glenn leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for a brief moment of rest. The faintest smile played on his lips as he whispered to himself, "They have no idea what's coming." "Do you know why you're still alive, human?" Zarish asked, his voice low and dripping with menace. He paused mid-step, his clawed fingers brushing the edge of a nearby console. "Your species has a habit of underestimating its position in this galaxy. Perhaps I will enjoy teaching you otherwise." Glenn leaned back as much as his restraints allowed, his expression unreadable. "I'd imagine it's because you're curious," he replied, his voice calm. "You're wondering why I let myself be caught. Wondering what I know that you don't." Zarish's eyes narrowed, the thin slits of his pupils contracting as his lip curled in irritation. He leaned forward, placing both hands on the armrests of Glenn's chair. The movement was calculated, meant to intimidate, but Glenn didn't flinch. He simply stared back, his gray eyes steady. "You speak of curiosity," Zarish hissed. "But what you fail to grasp is that curiosity in the Empire is not gentle. It does not prod or question, it extracts." Painfully, Glenn tilted his head slightly, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "So I've heard." The response drew a ripple of laughter from the guard stationed at the edges of the room, though they quickly silenced themselves when Zarish shot them a glare. The tension in the air thickened as Zarish straightened, his tail flicking in annoyance. He gestured toward a nearby technician, who immediately activated a series of holographic projections. The room dimmed as the projections illuminated, displaying schematics of human ships and deployment patterns. "Let's dispense with the games, Captain Glenn Maxwell," Zarish said, his tone turning icy. "We know who you are. We know your fleet operates dangerously close to our borders, skirting the edge of treaty violations. You are here to gather intelligence. Are you not?" Glenn remained silent, his expression unreadable. Zarish's frustration simmered beneath the surface, visible in the tightening of his jaw. The alien commander gestured again, and the restraints around Glenn's wrists and ankles tightened, sending a jolt of electricity coursing through his body. Glenn clenched his teeth but refused to cry out, his muscles tensing as he weathered the pain. "Impressive," Zarish muttered, almost begrudgingly. "But pain has a way of eroding even the strongest resolve. Shall we see how long yours lasts?" Glenn exhaled slowly, regaining his composure as the electricity subsided. He met Zarish's gaze with unwavering defiance. "You think this is the first time someone's tried to break me? You're going to need more than cheap tricks to get what you want." Zarish's lips curled into a smile, though it lacked any warmth. "Oh, we have more than tricks, Captain. Far more." The technician pressed a series of buttons, and the hologram shifted, revealing a rotating image of Earth. Glenn's gaze flickered toward the projection for a fraction of a second before returning to Zarish. The alien noticed and pounced on the momentary reaction. "You see, we've studied your kind," Zarish said, his voice dripping with condescension. "For all your bravado and resilience, you humans have a glaring weakness. Sentimentality, loyalty, a foolish attachment to the fragile lives of your people." Glenn's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Zarish chuckled softly, circling the chair like a predator savoring its prey. "We know about your fleet, your precious Earth. It wouldn't take much to—" "You're wasting your time," Glenn interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "If you think threatening my planet will get me to talk, you don't know me as well as you think." Zarish stopped mid-stride, momentarily taken aback by the interruption, but his surprise quickly gave way to a sinister grin. "Oh, I think I know you well enough, Captain. But we'll see how long that bravado lasts when you realize no one is coming to save you." Glenn's eyes flickered again, but this time it was with the faintest trace of amusement. Zarish noticed his grin faltering. "What are you smiling at, human?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Glenn leaned forward as much as the restraints allowed, his voice low and deliberate. "Who said I needed saving?" For the first time, Zarish hesitated, the confident facade slipping ever so slightly. Glenn's smirk deepened, and he leaned back into the chair, his calm demeanor unshaken. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken tension, broken only by the faint hum of the machinery. Unbeknownst to Zarish, Glenn's gloved hand twitched against the hidden device embedded in the fabric. The signal was still transmitting, each pulse carrying encrypted data to Commander Ashton Cole and the human fleet stationed in the shadows of the galaxy. Glenn's plan was unfolding perfectly. Every moment he spent in this room, every word exchanged, brought him closer to uncovering the Empire's secrets. Zarish, oblivious to the unfolding gambit, motioned for the guards to escort Glenn back to his cell. "Take him away," he ordered, his tone clipped. "We'll resume when he's had time to reconsider his position." Glenn was hauled to his feet, the guards gripping his arms tightly as they led him out of the room. As they passed through the dim corridors of the facility, Glenn took in every detail: the layout, the guard rotations, the placement of surveillance cameras. It was all valuable information, meticulously cataloged in his mind. When the cell door clanged shut behind him, Glenn allowed himself a brief moment of respite. He leaned against the cold wall, his breathing steady, his mind calculating. The Empire thought it had him cornered, but they were blind to the storm brewing just beyond their grasp. Far across the stars, Commander Cole sat aboard the flagship Eaglet, studying the incoming signal from Glenn's beacon. The encoded message was clear. Location confirmed, operation proceeding as planned. Cole's lips pressed into a thin line as he turned to his officers. "Prepare the fleet. We move at dawn." Glenn glanced at the faint blue light emanating from his glove, a small but vital beacon of hope. His lips curved into a slight smile as he murmured to himself, "They have no idea what's coming." To the guards patrolling outside, he appeared defeated, another captured human soldier awaiting his inevitable breaking point. But beneath his calm exterior, every thought, every muscle, every breath was a part of his calculated plan. The faint hum of the facility's power grid vibrated through the floor, its rhythm steady and predictable. Glenn had spent hours mapping its cycles, piecing together the intervals when the energy output spiked. Those spikes corresponded with moments when the internal security systems shifted focus, brief windows of opportunity he intended to exploit. The guards outside his cell were lax, chatting in low tones, their arrogance born of countless victories over weaker prey. Glenn had overheard enough to confirm the facility's importance, a critical node in the Galactic Empire's network, hosting data on their fleet deployments and, most importantly, the location of their command centers. Taking this place down wouldn't just cripple the Empire's operations, it would send a message. His fingers twitched against the concealed device in his glove, sending a silent pulse through the encrypted channel. The signal was received. confirmation flashing briefly in his mind. Backup was en route. But Glenn knew he couldn't wait for them to act. He had to set the stage for their arrival, and that meant escaping on his own. The faint click of a locking mechanism jolted him from his thoughts. The cell door hissed open, and a single guard entered, his weapon held lazily at his side. The alien's posture screamed overconfidence, and Glenn took note of every detail. The angle of the rifle, the weight of the guard steps, the split second of distraction as he reached to adjust his helmet. Glenn moved like lightning. His legs shot out, sweeping the guard's feet from beneath him. The alien hit the ground hard, his weapon skidding across the floor. Before he could react, Glenn was on him, his hands, though still bound, looping the chain of his restraints around the alien's throat. The guard thrashed, clawing at the improvised noose, but Glenn's grip was unrelenting. Within moments, the alien went still. Glenn retrieved the guard's access card and weapon, swiftly neutralizing the bindings on his wrists. He rolled his shoulders, shaking off the stiffness from hours of confinement, and retrieved the alien's helmet. It didn't fit perfectly, but it would do well enough to obscure his face from security cameras. With one final glance at the lifeless guard, Glenn stepped into the corridor, his movements fluid and purposeful. The facility was a labyrinth of identical hallways, their monotony broken only by the occasional flashing console or patrolling alien soldier. Glenn kept his head low, relying on the helmet to conceal his human features. His sharp eyes darted to every console he passed, mentally marking their locations. He needed a central terminal, something that would grant him access to the facility's database. Two guards approached from the opposite direction, their conversation casual. Glenn tightened his grip on the rifle and adjusted his posture, mimicking the stiff, formal gait of the Empire's soldiers. The aliens barely spared him a glance as they passed, their arrogance playing perfectly into his hands. He rounded a corner and found what he was looking for, a secure door labeled in the alien script he had memorized during his earlier captivity. Data core access. Glenn's pulse quickened, but his movements remained calm. He swiped the stolen access card, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The room was a hive of activity, filled with rows of glowing terminals and holographic projections. A handful of technicians were scattered throughout, their focus on the streams of data scrolling before them. Glenn assessed the situation in an instant, too many to neutralize quietly. He needed a distraction. His eyes landed on an exposed power conduit near the entrance. Glenn pulled a small device from his belt, an improvised explosive he had crafted from components scavenged in his cell. With a deft motion, he affixed it to the conduit and set the timer for 30 seconds. He slipped into the shadows, moving toward the central terminal as the countdown ticked away. The technicians remained oblivious, their conversations a low murmur of technical jargon. Glenn reached the terminal and inserted a small drive into its port. The device hummed softly as it began copying the facility's data, its encryption protocols bypassing the Empire's firewalls with ease. The explosion was small but effective, sending a shower of sparks cascading from the conduit. The room erupted into chaos as alarms blared and technicians scrambled to contain the damage. Glenn used the commotion to slip away, the drive safely in his possession. The halls were now alive with activity, soldiers rushing toward the source of the disturbance. Glenn moved against the tide, his stolen helmet and armor granting him just enough cover to avoid suspicion. His objective was clear, the hangar bay. He needed a way out before the Empire realized what he had done. As he approached the hangar, a familiar voice stopped him in his tracks. "You really are as resourceful as they say." Glenn turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as Commander Zarish stepped into view, flanked by a squad of heavily armed guards. The alien commander's expression was one of grim satisfaction, his claws twitching eagerly. "Did you think we wouldn't notice the missing access card?" The sudden activity in the data core. Glenn didn't respond. His mind raced, calculating the odds, mapping every possible escape route. Zarish's grin widened, as though sensing the gears turning in Glenn's head. "You've been a fascinating opponent, Captain Maxwell." But this is where your little game ends. Glenn's grip tightened on his rifle. "You talk too much," he said, his voice low. Zarish's grin faltered just as Glenn hurled a small flash grenade at the group. The explosion of light and sound disoriented the aliens, giving Glenn the opening he needed. He ducked into a side corridor, moving with practiced precision as blaster fire erupted behind him. The hangar bay was just ahead, its massive doors beginning to close as the facility went into lockdown. Glenn sprinted toward a small fighter craft, firing behind him to keep his pursuers at bay. He vaulted into the cockpit, his hands flying over the controls as the engines roared to life. Zarish appeared in the hangar, his face twisted in rage. "Stop him," he bellowed, but it was too late. The fighter shot forward, slipping through the narrowing gap in the hangar doors and into the open void of space. Glenn exhaled, his body sagging with relief as the stars stretched out before him. He activated the craft's stealth systems and plotted a course toward the human fleet. The data he carried was invaluable, but the mission wasn't over yet. The Empire had revealed its hand, and now it was humanity's turn to strike back. The vast expanse of space lay quiet for a fleeting moment, the stars glittering in an eternal stillness. But that stillness shattered as the human fleet emerged from the void, their warships breaking through the dark like steel titans. At the forefront was the Eaglet, its sleek form bristling with advanced weaponry. Commander Ashton Cole stood on the bridge, his expression as sharp as the knives strapped to his belt, his gaze fixed on a holographic display before him, where the sprawling Galactic Empire facility loomed like a black monolith against the stars. "The captain's signal confirms the success," said Lieutenant John Hayes, his voice tense but steady. "We have the intel, Commander. Glenn got what we needed." Ashton's jaw tightened. "And he's still out there. I won't leave him behind." The bridge crew exchanged glances but said nothing. They knew better than to question Cole's resolve when it came to Captain Glenn Maxwell. The two men shared a history forged in the crucible of war, a bond that transcended rank and duty. Ashton turned to the tactical officer. "Status on enemy defenses?" "Shields are active, and their fleet is mobilizing," the officer replied. "They're bringing their big guns online, sir. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they're fully operational." Ashton nodded. "Good. We'll be quicker. All ships, prepare for assault. Target their shield generators first. Priority 1. The Eaglet surged forward, flanked by smaller frigates and fighter squadrons. Plasma cannons lit up the void, streaks of blue and gold arcing toward the Empire's defenses. The alien facility responded in kind, its turrets unleashing a storm of firepower that lit the battlefield like a chaotic symphony of destruction. The clash was deafening, even in the silent vacuum of space, as ships twisted and weaved through the barrage. Inside the fighter craft he had stolen, Glenn Maxwell's hands moved with precision over the controls. The cockpit shook violently as he dodged incoming fire, weaving through the chaos toward the human fleet. His calm crackled to life, Ashton's voice cutting through the static. "Glenn, where the hell are you?" Glenn's lips curled into a faint smile. "On my way. Save some fireworks for me, will you?" Ashton's relief was palpable even through the calm. "Just get here in one piece. We're going to need you for the main event." Glenn glanced at the data drive secured in his chest pocket. The information it contained was damning. Coordinates of the Empire's hidden command centers, details of their invasion plans, weaknesses in their fleet. Humanity's survival depended on it, and he wasn't about to fail. As Glenn's craft approached the Eaglet, a squadron of alien fighters broke off from the battle to intercept him. His fingers danced over the controls, the fighters' cannons roaring to life. He didn't hesitate, each shot precise, each maneuver calculated. One by one, the alien ships fell, their debris scattering into the void. But there was no time to celebrate. The facility's massive hangar bay opened, and a colossal warship emerged, dwarfing the surrounding vessels. Its hull was lined with cannons that glowed ominously, their energy building for a devastating strike. Glenn's heart pounded as he realized its target, the Eaglet. Ashton, he barked into the comm, you've got a battleship coming your way. Its main cannon is charging. On the bridge of the Eaglet, Ashton's eyes locked onto the display. Evasive maneuvers. Redirect power to forward shields. The human fleet shifted formation, their ships converging to shield the Eaglet from the incoming assault. The battleship's cannon fired, a blinding beam of energy tearing through space. It struck the fleet's outer perimeter, vaporizing a frigate and damaging another, but the Eaglet emerged unscathed, its shields holding firm. Glenn's craft streaked through the carnage, weaving between the wreckage as he made his final approach to the Eaglet. The ship's hangar bay opened to receive him, and he landed with a jarring thud. No sooner had the cockpit hissed open than Glenn leaped out, the data drive in hand. Ashton was there to meet him, his expression a mixture of relief and urgency. You cut that close? Glenn handed him the drive. The Empire doesn't make things easy. Everything you need is on here. Coordinates, weaknesses, the whole lot. Ashton nodded, his focus shifting to the battle raging outside. Good. We'll finish this here and now. The two men exchanged a brief but meaningful glance before heading to the bridge. Glenn's presence was like a spark, reigniting the crew's determination. He joined Ashton at the tactical console, his eyes scanning the holographic display. We need to take out that battleship, Glenn said. It's the linchpin of their defense. Without it, the facility is vulnerable. Ashton grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. Let's make them regret ever crossing us. The Eaglet surged forward, its cannons blazing as it led the charge against the Empire's flagship. The human fleet followed, their formation tight and disciplined. The battleship retaliated, its turrets unleashing a relentless barrage. But the humans pressed on, their determination unyielding. Glenn's mind raced as he analyzed the battleship's movements. Its cannons were powerful but slow, its shields strong but concentrated on the forward arc. A plan began to form, and he relayed it to Ashton. We need to draw their fire, get their shields focused on one side, then hit them where they're weakest. Ashton didn't hesitate. You heard the man. All units, execute flanking maneuvers. Fighters, keep their turrets busy. The human ship split into two groups, one drawing the battleship's attention, while the other circled around. The alien vessel's shields flared as it absorbed the onslaught, but the humans pressed on, their coordinated assault overwhelming the Empire's defenses. Glenn watched as the battleship's shields flickered, a faint crackle that signaled their imminent failure. Now, he said, his voice sharp. Hit them with everything we've got. The Eaglet's main cannon fired, a searing beam of energy that struck the battleship's exposed flank. The explosion was catastrophic, a chain reaction that tore through the alien vessel. The battleship erupted in a brilliant fireball, its fragments scattering like embers. The human fleet wasted no time, capitalizing on their victory. With the battleship destroyed, the Empire's facility was left vulnerable. The Eaglet and its allies unleashed a final barrage, their weapons tearing through the facility's hull. One by one, its defenses crumbled and the structure began to collapse. On the bridge, Ashton and Glenn watched as the Empire's stronghold disintegrated. The cheers of the crew filled the air, a triumphant roar that echoed through the Eaglet. But Glenn's gaze remained steady, his expression eaglet. This is just the beginning, he said, his voice low but firm. They'll come back stronger. Ashton placed a hand on his shoulder. So will we. They've underestimated humanity for the last time. The two men stood side by side, the glow of victory tempered by the weight of what lay ahead. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. And as the Eaglet's engines roared to life, Glenn Maxwell knew one thing for certain. Humanity would not be broken.